start the
Wait.
stream.
All right.
You guys got to do it too.
You guys,
Perfect.
wonderful. Welcome.
Hello. Sorry, give me a second.
No, that's perfect.
Hello. So loud.
You're like,
Oh my gosh. Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Discovery Roanoke
You
podcast.
said it wrong.
It's
What?
Discover Roanoke.
It's Discover Roanoke. Did I say
Yeah.
Discovery Roanoke?
Discovery.
I like that one better.
Try it again.
All
That's
right.
fair.
Hello and welcome everybody to the inaugural episode of the Discover Roanoke podcast. My name is Zach Nowak, here with some friends. If you wouldn't mind, let's tell everyone who's in the room.
I'm Joey Beasley.
Taylor Dupuy.
Kyle Breeze.
Thank you so much for
Sneakers
being here,
Dupuy.
folks. Sneakers Dupuy is here.
Sneakers.
Sneakers is a cat. We'll see how much he has to contribute.
My guess? Tons.
Tons, probably. Quality podcast content. Podcat.
Podcast.
All right.
We're off to a great start here
Fantastic.
on the Roanoke Podcast.
Fantastic. John, Mr. John Fiorentino could not be here today, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We'll be hearing his voice on future episodes of the podcast.
Along with another guest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Guests.
Guests.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
He
I
is-
think we'll
yeah,
bring
cool.
guests on.
Let's bring some guests on.
Yeah.
If you couldn't tell, this is a loosely formatted podcast. We're kind of just figuring things out as we go along.
Yes. So,
We're excited.
as far as we know, we're Roanoke, and we're happy to be here on a podcast.
as far as
today.
we're not. As far
As
as
far as
Joey's
I know.
aware.
Yeah.
Time
We
may
are-
tell a different story.
For people that don't know who we are, we can maybe tell a little bit of a backstory for the first episode of kind of how we met and how we became a band
Yeah.
and why the heck we're doing a podcast.
Certainly.
Sounds great.
Yes. Some of you might be wondering, why the f- is this band doing a podcast?
We're wondering the same
Yeah, we
question,
haven't really-
actually. I don't know
It's
the
because
answer
if there's
to that
one
question.
thing we love doing more than playing music, it's listening to ourselves talk.
Yeah.
That's right.
We can't really have a conversation unless we have microphones in front of us. Again, we're all very self-centered. So we felt that this might be a good way to connect with one another.
Really just to document.
To document.
You know, we want to document for ourselves so
Yeah.
we can listen to ourselves, you know, in future times, like trying to go to sleep and stuff. We can just...
Yeah. We talk ourselves back to sleep.
So origin, Roanoke.
Origin.
The origin of
The
Roanoke.
origin.
So we moved here around 6 or 7 years ago
Yeah.
for some of us.
Mhm.
I met Kyle first, working at BB King's downtown. Through Kyle, I met Joey, who also worked at BB King's. Kyle and Joey moved to Nashville together. And, wow, I've told this story so many times.
Yeah, it's been told a lot.
Yeah.
And then we met Zach kind of through... Zach was kind of weird how we met Zach.
Yeah, Zach was an interesting one. So basically, just to give the quick runaround on how Zach came into our lives.
You should tell this story. Mine will be too long.
Yeah, let's basically all that happened was when Joey and I moved here, I answered a Craigslist ad for a drummer gig, and
Not my ad. I had other ads on Craigslist, but not for drummers.
I wasn't in that section that Zach had the ads in. But met up and met some great people and started playing some music. And the singer of the country band that had started from this Craigslist folks happened to know Zach through, what was it, Blake's girlfriend worked with you at Hattie B's.
That is correct.
At
Yes.
the Hattie B's, the infamous Hattie B's hot chicken.
Notorious.
Yes, world-renowned.
World renowned. Yes.
The one and only Hattie B's. And played a demo at a small little get-together that I recorded of Joey and Taylor singing a song, and partially in hopes that Zach would hear it and be interested in playing some mandolin on it, and he bit. And,
Basically,
take it from here, Zach.
yeah. Basically, Kyle went to Shelly, who knew me, pretty well at that point, and said, "Would he be interested in doing this?" And she was like, "Yes, absolutely. Text him now. He's not doing anything.
He
I can
needs
vouch for
friends,
Zach.
if
He
anything.
is
He
not doing
needs this.
anything.
Reach out a helping hand to him." And so Kyle did, and I was like, yeah. But then I was like, yeah, whatever, man. That's cool. Yeah, when do you want to get together? Yeah, Mother's Day? Sure. We got together on Mother's Day in 2014.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was 2014.
That was 2014.
Wow.
Anno Domini.
Yeah, I believe that night, me and Zach yelled at each other about John Mayer for about 4 hours, I think, drunkenly. That was the first time we hung out.
It's a passionate.
You make it sound like we were like arguing about John Mayer. We were arguing about which thing we liked about him the most.
Exactly. But we were drunkenly yelling about it.
Yeah,
That
we
is
were
what happened.
very
Yeah,
excited to
people
express
were
our
like,
mutual
wow.
love. Yeah,
Just gave you guys even believe.
it was terrifying.
I moved here with Kyle Breeze. He's over there. 2013, I think the year before that, we came up to look for apartments in December. It was kind of a crazy time whenever we came here to visit. The entire, people who have been to Nashville in the past couple years, you'll never see this happen again. You'll never see this. But at the time that we were here, the entire city was closed down. It was empty. There was not a soul in the street. It was kind of creepy, actually. And Kyle and I had brought skateboards with us and skateboarded from the Knights Inn Hotel over on
Spring Street.
Spring Street. We skateboarded through the entire city all the way to the Gulch and over by where City Winery is now, and back. And maybe one car the whole time, if that.
Yeah, it was crazy.
So a year later, we move up here and we get a job waiting tables BB Kings, where I met Taylor, and she didn't like me very much when we first met, historically.
Historically, let the record show.
At the record show.
No denying.
And I remember we were over at her apartment hanging out, and there was a guitar around, and I started playing a song, and Taylor knew it, and we started singing harmony on it, and it felt really good. I remember that was the first time
What song was that? Do you remember?
I do. I think it was "Run" by Lady Antebellum.
Was it
Alright.
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
Weird.
yeah. I like that
I mean,
song.
good
yeah,
song.
no,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
There's
Song, yeah.
nothing against the song.
Yeah.
That's a detail I find fascinating. That's like that's
Yeah, it was
that's
run
the
by Lady
song that
Antebellum.
you guys were like, yeah, we could do this.
Well, you first moved to Nashville, and you're like, everything about the city is awesome because it's a new place.
Yeah, Joey and
that
I
way-
especially,
yeah.
we were like hell bent on country music.
Yeah.
You guys were.
especially.
You guys have some good stuff in
Yeah.
the closet.
Oh man, there is.
Are you talking
Maybe
about?
we'll break it
Are you
out
talking
for,
about costume wise, or are you talking about
no.
music wise?
Music
I would say
well,
both.
both.
Yeah,
both.
Wow,
I'd say
yeah.
probably both.
There's
You
a
guys
lot.
really
There were a
leaned
lot of
into it.
belt buckles in
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
band.
There was a
back
lot
in
of
the
them,
day.
Belt
There were
buckles.
hats and
Oh.
belt
Hats,
buckles
boots,
and
belt buckles.
songs about trucks and
That was a brief period. No,
Yeah.
that maybe the first year, we went through our freshman year in Nashville just like everyone else did.
yeah, we were what, like
Yeah.
21?
22.
22?
Yeah. I had a
Children,
23rd
all
birthday
of
here.
you.
We were babies, just in a new city, trying to figure out what the heck we wanted to do. I think when Joey and I started writing together, it kind of, I grew up listening to, I think we all did, like, folk music, and that's such a broad term. I think a lot of rock music is rooted in folk music, and I know we, all grew up listening to a lot of that as well. But I think our songwriting is when we were kind of like leaned into the folk thing, and then Zach, of course, with the mandolin came in, and from country to folk to rock and roll.
To rock and roll.
I'm quite happy with rock and roll these days.
I'm quite happy with
quite
rock and
happy
roll.
with making regular.
Okay, Let's you're happy with making rock and roll, because to say you're happy with rock and roll, it's a bold statement, sir.
You have to,
Well,
there
rock and
has
roll,
to be some sort of
rock and
tension,
roll is
right?
controversial,
Rock and roll.
man. It's not supposed to be. Not everyone's supposed to like rock and roll. It's
Let's talk about that. Let's
Yeah.
talk. So, what is rock and roll these days, anyways?
Well,
What do
the
you guys
best,
think rock and roll
one
is?
of the best songs, Grammy award-winning songs from one of the most popular rock bands, and this is going to come back on the folk thing real quick, in the last 5 years was a cover of The Sound of Silence by Disturbed.
that doesn't count. That just happened. We all had to endure it.
I mean, it happened,
was
and it
wildly
was
successful.
incredibly successful.
When I first heard that sentence come out of someone's mouth, I was absolutely blown away. I was like, hold on. Disturbed. Ooh-wah,
yeah,
you know,
That one.
yeah.
released a cover of Simon and Garfunkel's
That's
Sound of
true.
Sounds. Out of all the songs to play, like especially the soft dark one.
Not the first cover they'd done either. of a band you wouldn't think they'd cover. But I don't know if anyone's familiar with Genesis's "Land of Confusion." But they do an amazing. I think it's a pretty amazing cover of it. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. Disturbed's cover. It just rocks a little bit harder, you know, than Phil Collins.
Man.
So topics covered so far. Disturbed, Genesis.
That's my fault.
So let's go back to okay. Sorry, I went off a little bit on the. So rock and roll in Zach's eyes.
Is disturbed.
No, not in my eyes.
Well, yeah. What was the point of that? Because
the point of that was, you know, like the state of rock and roll. Joey was like, I'm happy with rock and roll, and we were talking about, you know, what is rock and roll today? Because if you had asked that question in the late '90s, you know, when I was listening to rock and roll, because I'm older than everyone in this room, you know, rock and roll was a pretty definite thing, and it was starting. The pop punk thing was starting to happen, and you know, then there was this thing called Nickelback, and this thing came from Canada like a cold Arctic wind. And froze rock and roll still for, I think, like about 8 years. It was just that and things similar to that. Rock radio stations started dying. Rock music used to be the #1 music in America, and now country music is, which, you know, it's kind of like gone back and forth through the years, but, you know, country's been holding on since, you know, the mid to late 2000s, you know, the aughts there. So, I don't know. That's what, you know, the state of rock and roll today. Like, what is rock and roll? It's a great question. I don't know.
Today, well, it makes sense as to why folk music came back around after all that stuff. But
yeah,
you know what I mean. It maybe might. I don't know. You see the same thing happen with, like, you know, Nirvana and grunge and heavier grunge, you know, and then all of a sudden you come back around and then Hootie and the Blowfish pops up and everyone's kind of like, they kind of need the other side of the coin for a minute.
It seems like there's
there's always room for Hootie. Let's just make sure.
Of course. But it seems like it's very cyclical, and I think that maybe a lot of it stems from like just like I think a lot of rock and roll has to do with rebellion,
right?
And it's like maybe that it's just a constant state of rebelling against what's, you know, being pushed in your face kind of thing, and making your own.
I feel like it's time for, I think now is a great time for, I know you've mentioned the term rock and roll revivalist or rock revivalist, which I think is really interesting, because right now there is a lot of that, like, and again, there's no black and white, there's so many gray areas, but I think there's a big group of people that are hearing some of the music that's going to the radio right now and aren't happy about it.
Right.
So like, the idea of a rock revivalist thing is really interesting in the time right now.
Well, right now, I think we're as closely linked to some of the more historical events throughout time in our time right now, you know.
What do you mean?
I think, you know, we're at war. There have been protests.
There's been a big struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are 5 countries currently that have huge protests. It's the 25th week of protest in Hong Kong. That's half a year.
Wow, that's insane. I feel like people don't, I mean, like back in like the 60s and 70s, and like people would write about that stuff, and that's how, I wonder if that's how a lot of that stuff was more publicized, is through music, because I feel like that's not really an avenue anymore, music-wise. I don't really hear a lot of that.
It just comes from so many places now. There's
social media.
You know, there was only one source to get your music back in the day, and that was like the radio,
That's true.
or the jukebox, or the TV.
Yeah.
And so those 3 channels were the way you could get your message out to somebody. So I think it spoke more.
Right.
You know.
Plus, I think a lot of it's more, at least like musically or lyrically, is a lot more cryptic now. Whereas like before, it might be like a little bit, you know, like the folk songs of the 60s, the protest songs, like. You would hear like Dylan talk about like these songs people would write, and then like a week later, another headline would come out, and that other one would be like obsolete, and that song would cease to exist with the headline.
Interesting.
And so like the idea of actual protest music is like, that's why he kind of always said like I'm not a protest singer.
Yeah.
Because he's just like that whole idea, like, you know, speak broader, be broader, the whole thing, as opposed to. I don't know, I lost my train of thought.
You're doing great, though.
I was doing so, and I was like, man, I'm doing good here.
Are you saying that by speaking broader and being broader, you hit a wider range of people, and at the time it ends up standing
Yeah,
for
if you sing,
things.
if it stands in time. Like you sing about something specific, and something else happens the next day. That's
Right.
either escalates the thing that happened the day before, or just completely takes you off track of what happened the day before, and then it's irrelevant in a way. It doesn't stand in time. It's just like a
Totally.
throughout time. It doesn't stand throughout time. It stands in time.
Because if you think about it, a lot of these things are just examples of like when you're writing a song, it's like you're writing a mood, you're writing it's something about love, or it's something
It's
like
ambiguous.
It's ambiguous, and the meaning can have duality, and like I think that's such a cool thing about music and about lyrics is that you can talk about one thing that seems so specific, and then the other person hears it and they have a completely different connotation, or it just brings up a different memory for them than it was from the person that wrote it, or like it's crazy. Like you can have such impact without like wearing it on your sleeve
Right.
as much. I feel like.
So where does that leave rock and roll today? What does it look like? What is rock and roll? Because Zach touched on bands from the early 2000s. Those to me never seem like rock and roll. They just seem like harder rock or like a version of pop. If you really look at it, and I'm not saying that the people of their time weren't that they weren't great musicians or whatever, but like if you look back at like Tom Petty or Fleetwood Mac or Traveling Wilburys or like people who are like the godfathers of rock, of actual like heartland rock and roll.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're very different from that.
Yeah.
Well, I think when we touched on this briefly, but it's all reactionary. Grunge music was a reaction to the popular rock music of the 80s and early 90s, which was glam. It was Crew, Poison, Warrant.
What was the Warrant
White
song? Was it
Snake.
Cherry Pie? They did Cherry Pie.
Yeah, Cherry Pie. That was
Nice.
Warrant. We're not gonna sing it because, yeah. But anyways, grunge was the opposite of that. It was, it was.
We're
dudes,
sick of
dudes
this
in
hair, dude.
flannels
We're
and,
sick of this ridiculous glam.
Yeah,
we
we're
want to just get up here and do our thing.
And glam, you could say, was even started by Bowie, who's like awesome. So like was glam like bad? Were the New York Dolls bad? No, but like they were this crazy proto
certain
glam
point,
band.
it
But
just
at a
gets
certain
watered
point,
down.
at a certain point, I think the industry at the time would discover this is popular, and they market it and package it, and they make bands, help bands along that were doing that thing. And then as it becomes popular, there's sort of a reaction to it by people who aren't necessarily signed. And as they gain popularity and as record companies start to see that they are awesome, that's when you saw rock and roll get like harder. They got that really hard, loud, grungy sound through the 90s is because in the early 90s, it was a counterculture thing. And then by the end of the 90s, it was the culture.
And then
it was the top songs.
You start
on the
to see
radio.
gear companies realize there's a demand for this. They start making equipment
Yeah.
different. Tones get heavier and things get louder. And
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that was just how music was distributed. And I think now you get so many different genres of music coexisting at the same time, or at least we're aware of them, more aware of them now, because getting your music to people is a much smaller journey. If you wanted to put a song on Spotify, you could record it today, mix and master it yourself, and get it there within 48 hours.
Right.
Been hearing a lot of people recently talk about how just the line of genre in general now, like what is genre? Is it still a thing?
Right.
Because there's even if you listen to country, like it's got so much rock, so much, there's a pop side of country, there's a rock side of country. It's just interesting. And then there's Americana, which is just, a big dust bowl of folk, country, rock, blues.
Americana seems to be like the alternative of today.
Yeah.
Like country
Yeah.
and
Like this isn't quite adult contemporary, but it's
Right.
definitely not anything else.
Someone's
So,
saying,
like,
someone's
like,
saying you
you
get people that like Willie Watson, and you also get like Derek Trucks in under the same blanket of
Lake Street Dive was nominated for
Americana,
a
you know what I mean?
Americana Music Award a couple
Yeah.
years back. So even that sort of neo soul thing fits in
Right.
there.
Yeah.
Right. So what exactly is it anyway?
Anything, I think.
And
It's-
seeing like artists pair up too, like from completely different genres, like touring together and writing songs together and on the radio together. I think is kind of blending those genres together too.
one of those weird friendships that I've just like noticed that I keep noticing online, but I never really would have put together is Josh Ritter. You guys know Josh Ritter at
Yeah, I've
all?
been seeing his name pop up a lot.
He's got a song. I think. God, I really hope this is
Did you
Josh
say
Ritter.
are you friends with him?
No, I'm not friends with. I'm not friends with. I'm just noticing. Well, because I follow
Yeah.
people I don't know on social media.
I think he has that song
Everyone,
"Letting
but,
the Night Roll" or whatever. I think it's that. I think it's Josh Ritter.
No, that sounds familiar. The one song that I know for sure that it seems so classic is a song called Henrietta, Indiana, which is just a really fun couple of words to put next to each other. But he's been opening for Jason Isbell, and they've been
Yeah, that's
Isbell
right.
produced a
He's
record
been-
that
he's
just
been
came
doing it
out.
for a
And
long
he's been
time.
and him and he's been hanging out with the Punch Brothers and
Just
I'm
at
with
Americana
her.
Fest. Remember how we saw
Yeah.
Foy Vance? Keith
Foy
Urban
Vance,
came
yeah.
out during
Keith
his
Urban came out during that.
set.
So it's just this sort of who cares if you're doing it good? That's then credit where credit's
I guess that's
due.
why I brought it up. I guess kind of fitting back to way back at the beginning of the podcast, the origin of Roanoke. Kind of talking about our journey a little bit more.
Let me correct myself really quick. It is, let's see where the night takes us, where the night goes. Song by Josh Ritter.
Nice.
Wonderful.
So, anyways,
Let it be known.
Anyone
Let it
out
be
there
known.
who's trying to correct
Anyways,
me on this podcast.
props to Josh Ritter real quick. He's an awesome artist.
so yeah, I think we left off. We met Zach. We asked Zach to be in the band.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I know we went
Back
way
to
back.
the
We
origin
went
story.
Oh
off.
wow.
We went
Wow.
real
Yeah.
off.
So Taylor asked me to be in the band immediately.
Immediately.
Literally.
Not
immediately.
well, we played for a few hours or something, and
I just knew when you know, you know.
Taylor was like, "Do you want to be in a band?" And Joey was sitting next to her, and I think Joey was like, "Whoa!" He was like, "Whoa, hold slow. I don't know."
we have to seem cool.
I mean, yeah, move past that very quickly, but yeah.
Everybody traded numbers. We found out he was had the same area code as
we're
Zach
from the
and
same
or as
place.
Kyle and Joey.
Just a few years earlier.
Which we might as well get this out of the way, is not Roanoke.
Yeah,
We are
none
not-
of us.
None of us
from
are from
Roanoke.
Roanoke.
Listen,
Good call.
name of the
Any Roanoke.
podcast, not from Roanoke.
Not from Roanoke.
There's a Roanoke, Texas. There's a Roanoke in Illinois, I think. There's the Roanoke in Virginia. There was the Roanoke Colony, which is in North Carolina. Is where
None
it
of
was.
which are we from.
None of which is where we are from.
Fair question,
Yes,
but we're not.
but we're not from there.
Depending on what day of the week you ask me, I'm from a different place.
That's very
Yeah,
true.
that is very true.
But I did spend, I went to high school in Florida.
Yes.
Where Joey and I are from.
Yeah, I think you're from Florida, kind of.
Joey thinks you're from Florida, Zach.
Yeah,
Kind of.
I know. That's,
Joey's
that's fine.
opinion
That's
said you're
fair.
from Florida.
That's fair.
I mean,
I'll
those are your
take it. I'll
formative
take it.
years.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
You don't
10
remember
years
what the,
old.
you don't remember
on,
what the
like,
fuck you were doing. You were 10.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
You know?
no, you put me, if you drop me in the middle of West Palm Beach, I'd know where I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you put me in New Haven, Connecticut, I'd be like, yeah, I don't know, where's Pepe's Pizza?
Yeah.
Shout out to Pepe's Pizza, it's good.
Shout out to Pepe's Pizza. So we met Zach.
So we met
he
Zach.
was in the band,
He's in the
and
band.
then now we're a band.
So, well, I mean, there was lots in between. We just started writing songs. We started immediately. I don't know. We had nothing better to do. We were just all playing music together, playing shows at BB King's. We had a handful of songs. We got the opportunity to record. I think we were banned for how long before we recorded the first album?
Oh man, we had
months,
played
maybe.
we had
2
played
months,
two
maybe?
shows.
Yeah, we played two
Yeah,
shows.
May
We're like,
to
yeah, we're ready
August,
to
whatever that is.
record a record.
Yeah.
So we recorded a record, and it took us, I think, over a year, right?
It
Oh,
took
it was like
the
2
2
recording-
years.
years.
2
the
years to
recording
record and
process-
Yeah.
to record.
Well, it came out
The recording process was
2016?
not 2 years.
Mhm.
It was everything after that. Because we had to get it mastered or mixed by two different people or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
we had to go
definitely-
into
See
another
what
studio.
happens when you make a record
Is that it takes a long
is
time.
you spend your money on studio time and maybe some guest artists coming in, and you mix the record and you master the record, and then you don't have any more money and you have to release it.
Yeah.
And CDs aren't free, and PR is not free, and so we did the Indiegogo campaign that maybe some people listening were a part of, and if you did contribute to that way back in the day, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. love you.
But we were able to raise the funds needed to, get the record out and take the show on the road for a while. So
Yeah.
that was
And
it.
for the first album, I mean, it did pretty good. Like, it got some good PR.
Yeah.
It got some
Yeah.
good Spotify stuff. We were
Shout
very
out to
thankful
Spotify
for that.
hooking us up on that playlist.
Yeah, and then I think soon after that, John, who Kyle grew up with in Florida, moved. Well, between then we got a house. We all moved in together, and
Yeah, and that was like
I
working.
think we did
on
that
the first
while we
record.
were
Yeah,
working on the
working on the
record.
first
we
record,
moved
we
in
all
together.
moved in a house
Pre-production
together.
up
Yep.
until like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. All of our roommates
Yep.
like crowded in
We
the
had like
tiny
8
band
people
room.
in the
Yeah, everyone just drinking and
Oh,
Just
gosh.
open party
Yeah.
rehearsals.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
It was
Everyone
wild.
loved it.
Yeah, I mean, and hats off to our roommates at the time because it could have gone completely different than that.
and that's
happening?
my camera
that-
dying.
Well, I got
Oh,
another
no.
battery
Just
if you
died.
want.
You got another battery?
I got another battery in the.
That's okay.
Where is
Well,
it?
this will
It's,
just be. We'll just have to focus on
in-
Joey and Taylor for this portion.
in my room. It's plugged in.
We're at about 25 minutes, so we probably should wrap up in like 5 minutes or so.
Okay, we can do that. That feels all right.
All right. In the meantime, while Kyle's finding his camera, we'll just edit him back in when he gets his camera. It's on the futon.
This is the portion of the podcast you may have heard on other podcasts where somebody leaves the room and shouts from the other room about something, comes stomping back in, and we're choosing not to edit it out because we're real like that.
Also, I want to point out that Kyle's Hero 7 ran out of battery before mine did.
Dude, it was like 30%, I thought I charged it, but I did not.
It's a couple of GoPros, just comparing GoPros.
Pro bros comparing Go-Go's. I don't know.
It's a GoPro dojo.
Wow. Wow. This week's episode brought to you by GoPro. Not true.
Kind of true. But anyway, so after that, we got the record out there. It did what it did, and it set a platform for us to continue making music
Yeah.
and to have and to have some outlets that we were super grateful for and still are to this day.
I
Yeah.
think overall we haven't to this point as the day of this conversation we haven't had any huge leaps forward. It's sort of been a progression, a steady progression.
Yeah, the first record was
each thing
definitely
building.
the first step, the
Yeah.
first leap that we got.
Yeah,
going.
I think
that was
the
okay.
leap
That
happened
was
early.
That
Yeah,
happened
that's what
early.
happened,
Yeah. Okay, so you're right. You're right. But I think
I think the EP
most
did
of it's
pretty good.
been a pretty
Yeah,
steady
we've been
thing.
I would tour a lot, which I think
Yeah.
has been our best kind of avenue
Yeah.
to get the word out. And
Yeah, we hit the ground running on touring. I think the first time we went out on the road was us begging Zach to rent a minivan, and then we just took Taylor's car.
I was the only person who was over the age of 25 at the time.
Weird.
But he was the
So-
only one that didn't have a
But
credit
I was
card.
also the only person who didn't have a credit card in my name at the time. So I had to put a $250 hold on my debit card so we could rent minivan Morrison, Chrysler Pacifica, and drive to South Carolina.
I
Play
think it
a
was
show.
sweet.
It was sweet. We were just in a Pacifica in the Pacific Northwest not
That's
too
true.
long ago.
Ooh,
I don't know if you
yes.
guys remember Pacifica Part 2.
So from Pacifica in the Smoky Mountains to Pacifica in the Cascades.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got to tell you guys, every time I get behind the wheel of a minivan, I fall more and more in love.
Minivans are great.
I think it's such a versatile automobile. I was thinking about building some like sound baffles for my practice space at my house, and I was watching a video where a guy sort of goes into how to do it. But he's like, you need to get these 8-foot long pieces of whatever, and I just looked out the window at my Volkswagen Jetta and was like, I don't know. I don't think I can get those in there.
Yeah.
But if I had a Chrysler Pacifica, well, those stow and go seats just power fold right into the bottom, and
Zach is a walking ad.
man.
So Chrysler
Just be
Pacifica is
amazing.
awesome. Back to rock and roll. What are we talking
Sorry,
about?
no,
rock
that
and
was-
roll?
No,
This
minivans are
I'm-
necessary for rock and roll sometimes.
I'm gonna be honest. I made that music.
I want to make the
related.
tie-in between rock and roll, really, because they're probably like, why is this folk band talking about rock and roll?
That's
So
a
I
good
guess
question.
so I think that bands progress a lot. I think that they go through many changes, many genre changes, stylistically, songwriting wise. But yeah, we're feeling really excited because we're kind of we started as a folk band, and our new stuff is a little rock and roll.
I
And
think anyone who's.
we're-
You know?
I feel like we're not gonna get a whole lot of like non-fan listeners for the first couple episodes. I feel like most people out there have probably seen a Roanoke show in the last 6 months, and those people have probably noticed a bit of a difference.
Is it a little different?
There's been it's been a while since Joey hung up the old acoustic guitar. It's been a couple of years, but
It has been. My God.
Yeah.
I was looking at that thing the other day, and I just had to apologize to her I was like, I've been neglecting you.
You know she's in this room.
She is.
She's looking at you.
She
right
is?
now. She's there.
Oh, God.
Yeah, she's behind the amp.
Yeah.
See, it's symbolic.
I stuffed her behind an
Yep,
amp.
stuff behind an amp. There she is. But yeah, our sound is sort of embracing how did I say the other day? It's instead of being the harder side of like folk or Americana, it's sort of the lighter side of rock and roll.
We have not recorded any of it yet, so it's not a promise.
Yeah, well, it could be anything,
But I
but
think you do it.
yeah.
Yeah, no,
We started
gross.
feeling really bad going to folk festivals and bringing a bunch of amps.
Yeah, we started to get a
The
little.
sound guys
I don't
in
think
there.
there was any guilt to be had. I think that there was some confusion from the audience.
For sure.
The first couple songs, they were like, "What?" And then they were like, "Screw it,
Yeah.
yeah."
Yeah.
Took 'em a
People like
second, but-
music,
Yeah.
you know. But I think it was
I think
definitely
it's fun. You know,
But like I said,
it
it
felt
all
like
and it's all
outliers.
rooted in like this. I think what is really great about us and our style is I think a lot of it comes from the songs we do what the songs need. So it's like we're still doing
yeah.
the folk songwriting, but just adding more of an edge and different instruments and
And let's be
it's
Totally.
putting out more of a show. I think.
Being
Yeah,
completely
more
honest, like-
energy,
More
more
energy, yeah.
impact.
Yeah. None of us grew up listening to folk music. Folk music's great. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
well,
And
like-
I love folk
I mean, I
music, and it's
kinda-
fantastic. But a lot of us grew up listening to 70s, 80s, 90s rock.
Would you
and
call
roll.
Joni Mitchell folk?
I would.
Yeah,
I
mean,
would.
so-
I also would call Joni Mitchell rock and roll in her own right. She had a lot to do with that time in music.
call Neil Young folk too.
Yeah, he is folk. He's
And
also
rock and roll.
See,
And rock
that's
and roll.
that's really what we're kind of really leaning into is like these. I feel like, anyways, these people that we grew up listening to that we just feel a strong connection to
Yeah.
and feel a strong connection to their music, like the Fleetwood Macs and the Eagles and
Those
you know,
two
Neil
artists.
Young
Yeah,
and-
those two artists that you brought up are interesting because those two artists specifically go about folk music in a very rock and roll way.
Well, yeah. I mean, you had it was Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young.
Yeah.
At one point, and if you listen to, Neil Young's one of those guys where it's really hard to place. Like sometimes you'll listen to a song and you'll go, "That must be a really old Neil Young song," and you find
Yeah.
out, no, that came out in the '90s.
Yeah.
It's like he'll go right back to that sort of like softer thing, and then he'll play Keep on Rocking in the Free World.
Well,
So.
and you think about like something like Down by the River, played differently, and like that song could totally be a folk song, an old bluegrass stuff,
Right.
like standard, Shot My Baby Dead, like it's the murder ballad kind of,
Yeah.
whole thing, but instead it's this like 9-minute long rock song filled with jams, and it's just kind of, it's really intense, but that's like, that's it. Sometimes, the music gets more intense, and we're kind of just trying to follow it that place a little bit. Yeah,
Right.
we grew up with a lot more foundation, I think, in a lot of this older like rock music, and it's finally kind of coming
Finally
out.
Come
I
to
think,
fruition.
yeah,
Yeah.
regardless of whether or not we wanted it, I think it's
Yeah.
like finally just like
it feels good. It feels right. The
Yeah.
songs feel right, and
Yeah.
the performances feel good, and
The energy matches the material
Yeah.
on stage, I think.
and
and
yeah, definitely. I feel like we've been on the
Joey's
edge of it
energy
for
matches
for
that.
years. Yeah. Cool. We're coming up on 30 minutes here. As a sign off, this week is Halloween and my birthday. What's
happy birthday, Taylor.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Taylor.
Thank you.
Everyone want to sing happy birthday to Taylor? Just the audience.
No, I think
Just the
somebody-
audience.
Just the audience.
Can we just sit here silently while the audience, everyone at home, you guys just all want to sing
I'll,
happy
count, I'll,
birthday to
count you
Moment
in.
of
Taylor?
I'll count you in. Are you ready?
All right, Joe.
1, 2, 3.
It's beautiful.
Wow, you guys sound so good.
Crying. There's a tear.
Oh wow!
Thank you guys so much.
Thank
Wow.
you.
Thank you,
wow!
thank you.
Yeah, wow!
Fantastic.
Happy
Wow,
birthday, Taylor.
beautiful,
Thank you.
beautiful.
Wow.
What
Thanks,
is
everyone
what
singing
is
at
everybody's Halloween costume? If can I count to 3 and everyone say what you're gonna be?
Yeah.
Well, maybe not.
I don't know. I haven't.
You know,
I'm
yeah.
I'm undecided at this point.
Okay, you
but-
two say what yours is gonna be.
I'm going dressed as Taylor.
I was gonna go dressed as you. That's so weird.
Nice.
That's crazy. Didn't you guys talk about that once? Wasn't that a thing? You
No,
guys
we
were
had
gonna
to
do?
switch clothes one time.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
For
You
like,
were. It was a game.
it was
No,
some,
At a
yeah.
party.
Oh yeah.
and you were
I
like,
was a flapper, and you were Shaggy.
Wait, did
Shaggy.
we have a palooza for you again?
Yeah.
is that what happened?
Oh
I think so. I
I
man.
can't recall. No, it must have been yours.
Yeah.
It was
Oh,
yours
yeah,
because
mine.
it was
This is
Halloween.
Halloween.
It was Halloween.
It makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Halloween-a-palooza. That
Okay,
was a
what are you gonna be for
long-
Halloween? 1, 2, 3.
Postal Malone.
Kenny G Unit.
That didn't work out well.
That didn't work out at all.
You came at me really quick, and I wasn't ready. And I don't know. But no, Kenny G Unit. And I'm trying to find some curly-headed friends to join up and or Joey, if you want to get a perm.
I'm not
I'm
against
trying to
it.
get a gang of Kenny G's together,
Dude.
so we can be Kenny G unit.
I might go get a wig. I gotta be honest. I see. Well, what I do
I think
have
a perm. I think you should go.
a perm. I should just go.
I think
for
you
a
should go
perm. Good
fully
Lord.
in. Yeah, next few months.
I'm
What
try-
if he was Art Garfunkel, who was also a member of the Kenny G unit? You know, with the curly hair, sort of with the soft.
Well, hang on. It
eyes.
could be Kenny G unit featuring.
Or would you both be Kenny G as a unit?
I want to be Yanni.
That's my thought.
Again,
but
Yeah.
I was Yanni one year, but I was Vampire Yanni. I don't think anybody got it.
You just look like a vampire.
Yeah. So if
You
I
didn't have the. Do you gonna have a mustache?
I think I'm gonna
You
get
gotta
a
have the
mustache. Yeah.
mustache.
But if I could be Yanni, we could be smooth jazz dudes.
When were you? Remember when you were Craig Allman?
Oh my god. Well, what I do have in my closet right now is I have a kimono, and I have a fake beard. So I'm thinking about being the Duck Dynasty. Like
Oh wow!
it's a thinker. Yeah.
It took me a second.
Yeah.
Mine's dumb. Postal Malone is just Post Malone dressed as a postal worker. But
are you going? You're going face tattoos, right?
Yeah.
absolutely. You know,
Man.
he's got some weird ones. They say weird things. And barbed wire on the scalp
Barbed
line.
wire, and there's a
And he's
sword.
gotten more. Yeah, the sword on the right side. Yeah, I've been studying Post Malone's
face sword
for
is
the last
badass
24
though.
hours.
Let's all be honest here.
The
Face
face sword
great.
is pretty cool. Stay away over his right eye. That's weird.
Just stay away from his eyebrow.
Just stay away, and then
the right eye.
always fired under his
Dang.
eyes because
Interesting.
he's on. There, I found a picture. While
Maybe-
googling pictures of him, I did find a
maybe-
picture of him just looking like your neighbor in like an orange polo shirt. and
Do you
khaki
think
shorts.
that came from
It was
him just maybe
hilarious.
getting fired a lot?
always fired. He's just always getting fired.
I think he's like fired up.
He's always fired up.
Yeah,
It's possible. Anyways, Taylor, what are you gonna be dressed as?
I'm going as the childlike empress from Neverending Story.
Of course.
Childlike Empress, is that her official name on
She's
is.
childlike.
That's weird.
But an empress.
I'll be childish Gambino.
Does
Her
that
name
mean she's
actually
not
means
actually a
man-child,
child?
Right.
Because I always thought there was this weird subtext of romance between her and Bastion, but if she's like 100 years old and
No,
just
she's definitely
childlike, then that's kind of weird.
Yeah, she's definitely not a child
Okay.
for real.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
never
so
can
maybe-
tell. I mean, the story never ends.
Also, I was thinking. So Taylor asked me to be Atreyu from Neverending Story.
Okay, you got the hair for it.
Yeah, well, I was gonna be the metal band Atreyu.
Okay, yeah, all right, I dig it.
Sneakers can be Falcor.
Oh,
Unless you wanna be Falcor, Zach.
no.
Zach is a natural
Post-
Falcor.
He is natural Falcor.
With the hair down. You gotta see him with the hair down.
Luck Dragon.
Anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in to the first episode.
Yeah,
Thanks
this
for
was fun.
listening to us talk. We're gonna be looking for subjects for the next podcast, have guests on, and maybe play some music as well. So
Yeah, we think we're gonna maybe get some topics from the audience here, and then we're gonna have like one person sort of
Yeah.
research and lead like
So
a
to-
conversation.
To definitively say what's happening is you guys need to tell us what you want us to podcast about,
Absolutely.
and we
Yeah.
will podcast about it.
anything, just weird.
Mostly.
Yeah, I want.
Yeah, it doesn't have
let's-
to be the
let- Doesn't
band.
need to be the band.
can
It
be,
can
but-
be. You can ask more questions about us.
We're putting the power in your hands and use it responsibly because we can take it away.
Or irresponsible, it'd be fun.
Yeah, that's fun
yeah.
too.
Or be yourself, man.
Irresponsibility is fun. I think it's probably good to note that, depending on the people that are listening in real time whenever this gets released, which I'm assuming will be soon, that will be in Atlanta at Eddie's Attic on
Yes.
November
Nice.
3rd.
Third.
It's a Sunday night at Eddie's
Sunday
Attic.
night at Eddie's Attic.
Good call.
Kyle Cox.
Yep.
Kyle Cox, fellow Nashvilleian.
Oh yeah, we'll
We're
be playing
pumped
after.
about that.
Cowboys.
And we're going to Tallahassee afterwards for a sold-out show
Ooh.
at FSU.
For the opening night series,
Of
yes.
the night series, Zach's alma mater. Yes, we're all proud of you, Zach.
Yes, we are.
Back when he graduated in 1857, the school looked a lot
When it was
different. but-
when it was still a women's educational college. Yes.
That old historic bell tower was still there, though. I remember
no,
that
he's
bad
excited
boy.
to go back.
Bell Tower? No,
I've
there's
never-
no-
I've never
that's
actually-
Gainesville.
I've
has
never
a
been
bell
to the
tower
Florida State University campus.
It's very beautiful. You guys are gonna.
I'm
like it.
excited.
It is pretty.
All right, y'all.
Yeah.
Thanks again for tuning in.
Thank
we'll
you.
See you next time.
Yeah.